Again, I'm so grateful for you all to be here. There's a lot of stuff competing for our attention, so I do not take it for granted that you are here engaging not only in community with me, but obviously investing in yourself. And so tonight, we are going to dive into a topic that is at the heart of effective communication. How do you lead smarter and not louder? How do you make sure that your communication is landing the first time instead of repeating yourself, which can be very exhausting, and all the things that go into that? So I have a deck that I'm going to work through. And I'm going to pop in and pop out, and I'll highlight what we're going to go through. But before I get started to the topics, I just want to set a couple of expectations. First off, this is an interactive workshop. Right. I am one of those coaches that likes to get into the mix. I want to engage with folks. I'll ask you questions. I'll ask you to reflect. So as we'll do some real-time coaching. So I just ask you all to lean in, right? This is an opportunity for us to all put these concepts into practice and to really ideally take away something that you can use immediately. So my ask is that you are open and willing to engage. And by the end of our time together, my plan is that you guys will have some very practical tools to really help you lean into communicating in a different way to ensure that in 2025, your communication is confident, it's clear, and it has impact, all right? The other thing I just want to share is that we are filming. And so as we do interactive conversations, as we are talking about things, the replay of the workshop will be posted online. So just be mindful of that if you're sharing any sensitive information, because it will be public. So hopefully that gives you all some idea where we're going to go, but let's dive in. So I'm going to share my screen before we get started. And I see a few more people in here. I love it. We've got Anna from San Francisco, Curious, Amina, Nuanced. Ooh, I like that one. Bring it in. All right, let me get my screen shared. And all right, can you guys see that okay? Thumbs up if you can see the deck. Perfect. Okay, cool beans. All right. So lead smarter, not louder. I am Kibi Anderson. Welcome. And we're going to dive into talking all about the art of clear communication. And here's what we'll cover today. We're going to talk about why talking less leads to better results. And this is something that a lot of my leaders who are used to talking a lot sometimes react interestingly to. So I'm intrigued to see what you all say. We're going to dive into what it means to build consistent connection and trust. I want to give you all insight into a concept called currency and understanding why that's so important when it comes to effective communication that lands. I want to teach you all how to ask in more powerful ways, right? Like, how do you make sure that your asks are powerful, that they land and they actually get the results that you want? And then we're going to end with some transformational stories, people that I work with, just to really bring this to life and talk about some next steps for those of you who find this compelling and are maybe interested in ways to take this a little bit deeper. Now, I always like to kick this off with a conversation about myths, because when I tell you the number of times that I hear from clients, perspective, folks I'm working with, and I hear them talking about some of the challenges they're having with this concept, these are the traps that I oftentimes hear. And I just want to reflect them back to you to see if you maybe have fallen into those. If so, be vulnerable and drop a 1 in the chat if you hear any of these things that remind you of you. First trap, first myth: the more you talk, the more people will understand. This idea that if you keep talking and you say it a different way, at some point people will get the understanding that you're looking for. The second one is avoidance prevents escalation, right? Like, I won't say nothing because I'm just afraid it's going to make it worse. So I'll just keep my thoughts and my opinions to myself. That's a very common one. Number 3, the feedback sandwich. And I know people, if you don't know this, it's about when you give feedback, you want to start with something good, then lead with bad, perhaps, or the critical part, and then come back with something positive. Say the good stuff first. Start with something positive. And number 4, this is common that people say, well, my situation is unique, right? Like, this person's really specific. This person is particular. So this is why I have to do it a certain way, or this is why it's not landing when I try it, because this person is a little bit different. How many of you all, and let's just be clear, how many of you all have fallen into this trap before? And I'm trying to actually see if I can get y'all back on my screen so I can see you. There we are. Okay. Just put a one in the chat if you can say, yeah, I've done this before. Yes, I see. Everybody's kind of raising their thumbs, right? It's so common because in so many places where we learn communication on television, perhaps people you saw modeled, leaders who maybe were holding the title but didn't necessarily have the abilities, this is what we see. And the reality is, these are the absolute worst way to lead smarter, to lead with impact, to communicate in a way that's actually going to get you the results that you want. Because the truth is, it's exactly the opposite of what you've been taught, right? The truth is, you actually want to lead with silence more, right? Quality questions are a much more powerful indicator of whether or not you're going to have success, right? Not over talking is actually the thing that we're oftentimes trying to mitigate when it comes to beginning to transform your communication in a way that's going to work, right? Number two, you've got to address any issue first. Do it immediate. One of the things that I teach a lot of my clients is something I call the avoider meditation, which is do it fast, be direct, be consistent, do it often. I'm sorry, be fast, be direct, be concise, do it often. And this is the idea of not letting things fester, not sitting back, but actually leaning in and making sure that you are addressing things as they come up quickly, because that is the fastest way to build trust, right? Number three, direct, empathetic feedback gets better results. I am going to dispel you all tonight of this belief that the feedback sandwich works. It does not work. It is not an effective way to give feedback, because here's the reality. Most people are used to the feedback sandwich, right? So when you say the first thing, they aren't listening because they're already getting their emotional state braced, ready for hearing the bad thing. And so the positive thing that you actually want to say gets lost. And because of that, people sometimes can feel, or they can describe those kind of exchanges as manipulative. So I am not saying you don't give positive feedback, but the idea is, how are you doing it more consistently throughout the dynamic, throughout the relationship, as opposed to just doing it in the moment where you have to give perhaps some critical feedback or some construction feedback. So the idea is, be direct and be empathetic and be authentic, and that'll get you much better results. And then the last one is, proven techniques are actually very common, and they can be applied to any scenario. So this idea that your situation is unique is actually not true. Human beings are very consistent and they're predictable. And so the tools that I'm going to talk you through today are actually tools that can be used in a lot of situations, right? These tools that I'm going to talk you through are very, very kind of simple and understanding, and that's intentional because I want it to be something you can easily access, especially in moments where you might be dealing with a high stress conversation or you're dealing with an emotional reaction. So they're simple in concept, but definitely difficult in execution because, again, you're dealing with human beings. But again, human beings are very predictable. So the idea that your scenario is a scenario that nobody else has dealt with, very, very low. And I've worked with a lot of clients who can attest to this being the case. So I want to shift a little bit now to just kind of talking to you a little bit about myself, right? I am an executive coach. I've worked with leaders at global companies all over the world. You can see some of the clients: Netflix, Starbucks, Chase. I have mastered these principles. It's why I'm hired by many people to help the brightest teams, do amazing work, and especially when it comes to communication. Now, this is how it's going. But I want to share you a story about how it started, because a lot of these principles I'm going to talk to you about were developed because I fell into every trap that I talked about, right? Like, I fell into all of the lies. And there's one story in particular that I'll share with you in my early career where I was in a leadership role and I was being tasked with pushing forward a cross-functional kind of cross-team project. And it was actually really big. I mean, this was a multi-million-dollar deal. It was the first time I was being given really the platform to push forward something that was global in nature. And it was going to allow me to really just show up and really show what I was worth when it came to my specific contribution to the bottom line that year. And so I spent hours crafting the perfect pitch, and I got the most amazing deck together, and I was finally able to bring all the team members in the room, and I did this meeting, and I thought that I knocked them off their socks. And in the meeting, folks were kind of smiling and, nodding and all that kind of stuff. But after the meeting ended, nothing happened, right? And when I say nothing happened, folks who I thought were going to do the parts that I needed them to do to make sure this happened didn't follow through, right? Like the alignment that I was expecting wasn't there. And over time, the enthusiasm fizzled out. And I was stuck because I was like, what is going on? And in retrospect, as I look back and I began to assess what was going on, I realized I had fallen into all the traps I talked about, right? In the meeting, I avoided all signals from the folks in the room. After I gave a specific point, um, blank stares, right? Like I wasn't really getting a ton of follow-up questions, like all the things that you would want to make sure you were having to ensure that you were getting alignment, right? That your points were leading, that your points were landing. I wasn't getting that. But instead of like leaning in, I leaned back, right? I was like, ooh, okay, well, I'm seeing people nod. So clearly that means one thing. But the truth was, it wasn't actually the reality of what was being experienced on the other side of that. In my pitch, I only focused on the upside, right? I intentionally only talked about how it would help my bottom line, but I never really discussed the risks, because my fear was, well, if I talk about the risks, then they're not going to say yes. So let me just make sure it looks like it's all perfect and pretty. But the reality was I wasn't addressing their doubts. I wasn't addressing their concerns. So again, it was really hard to get buy-in because folks are like, sounds good, but I don't know. I don't even want to put my name on the line here because I don't know if you're actually going to be sensitive to my needs, right? All the other things. I believe that there was a magic bullet that I could say the perfect thing, and all of a sudden people would say yes. But the truth was, I completely misunderstood that the key to communication, and this is what we're going to dive into, wasn't about what I was saying, right? But it was really about how I was saying it. And it wasn't until I began to understand how to put that into motion in a more intentional and consistent and credible way that I was able to create the connection, that I was able to create the trust, and ultimately the understanding that allowed me to really level up and over time be absolutely killer when it came to presentations that landed, getting things done, and doing it in a way that kept me feeling energized. I didn't feel exhausted, and I was able to build trust and respect across the organization. And so this is really what I want to make sure that everybody is able to recognize. So if you see any of those things in yourself, hopefully by the end of this workshop, you'll have some ways and some ideas on how to push that forward. All right. So this is a stat that I always share at the top of these conversations because for me, when I first started, it blew my mind, right? 17 hours a week. This is how much time managers spend re-explaining, reworking, and clarifying communication, right? Like this is the time where you're like, I'm saying the same thing over and over again and I'm not getting results, right? And when you think about that, in an average work week, you're talking about 40 weeks, 40 hours, right? Just give or take. So imagine 50%, almost 50% of our time is spent on wasted time having to re-explain things. And if we could literally just get it right the first time, we can reclaim all that time back. And I know for me, I think about time that I could spend with my family, time that I could spend doing things that I love outside of work, right? Taking care of my kids. All of that stuff is key. And imagine if we could reclaim our time, right? Being able to have dinner at a time which feels reasonable, right? Finally signing up for that art class, all the things that we tend to put off. And I just want to highlight, like, these are the costs of unclear communication, right? This is why it's so important for us to prioritize today more than ever, as we are up against so many competing deadlines, shrinking budgets, expectations that are being asked and put on smaller teams as we see people downsizing. This idea of like why communication matters becomes even more urgent because there is a toll. There is a toll when it comes to your own personal life. And there's also a toll when it comes to the opportunity, right? Because if you can reclaim time, you can improve results and you can have a lot more fun. Now, I want to take a minute to pause here and to introduce a concept that is such a key element when it comes to leading smarter, not leading louder. And it's something I call the curiosity quotient. And if anybody's heard about this, please, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts, but I want to just dive into this because if you are able to elevate what I call your curiosity quotient, this is actually a huge step towards being able to overcome a lot of the challenges that can create this can be a huge step to help you overcome a lot of the challenges that I've talked about, right? So what is the curiosity quotient? This is, in essence, how much are you listening versus talking, right? It measures how much you actually are leading with curiosity, i.e. listening, being silent, taking a moment to actually process and reflect versus how much you just talking. And oftentimes when you're talking, you are doing what I call leading with assumptions, because you're moving without actually checking in and assessing how much is this landing? Am I addressing their concerns? All the things that we talked about that create the mids that a lot of people leave, can demonstrate day to day in their day-to-day work. And this is what we're trying to get away from, because if you can level up your curiosity quotient, just be intentional about how much time you are spending listening versus talking, it can transform your communication, right? It helps it go from a transactional nature, which is typically one way, I'm talking at you in exchange for you doing something, versus a meaningful dynamic and a meaningful conversation where two people are actually going back and forth because there is interest in what the other person thinks, right? One of my clients said this really interestingly enough. She was like, Kibi, I realize I want to be interested and not interesting at this level of my career. And I wonder how many of you all can relate to that. We oftentimes move through the world as leaders thinking our job is to be interesting. But I am here to actually shift that and help you understand that the way to increase your curiosity quotient is to make sure you are looking to be interested. All right. And so this is a concept that I work with individuals. I also do this on an organizational level. So I just want to throw this out because I oftentimes will have clients, as I work with them, really examine what is your curiosity quotient as an individual. And then oftentimes, as we think about it at the macro systemic level, we'll talk about it from an organizational level, right? Because this is about culture, individual and the macro, and how well you're able to increase your CQ at the macro level, at the systemic level, also has huge implications on how everybody in your network is able to lead smarter and not harder. And so if there's interest in that, please reach out to me. I also dove a lot into this into my last workshop called Asking Big. So if there's an interest in understanding this a little bit more, please rewatch that recording because it's up live right now, definitely. So I've been talking a lot, right? And I want to take a minute to actually, again, open this up and ask a reflection prompt. If you're so kind, please think about a recent conversation where maybe you felt misunderstood. How much of that moment involved listening versus talking? And if you're open to coming off mute, I'd love to just hear. Again, this is all about shared experiences. How much did you actually listen versus talking? And again, oftentimes when communication breakdowns, if you reflect on it, you'll see you may have leaned in a little bit more and started talking instead of being quiet. I see folks percolate. Lauren, anything you can share? No? All right, Amina?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Kibi. We went to NYU together, by the way.
I recognize. I know when you popped on, I was like, oh wait, I do recognize her face.
Thank you for having this. Yeah, it's a very interesting concept. I'm thinking of a recent conversation with a friend, a relative, who, I had a misunderstanding and a disagreement some time back, and we were kind of at an impasse. And so it was just left unresolved. And we circled back to have another conversation about it. And I did listen, so the first time around, I think that I expressed a lot. I heard a lot, but I may not have conveyed that I listened, in that initial conversation. This time around, I think I really just led with listening. Like I still felt the same ways about these things, but I felt that, perhaps to get beyond the impasse, maybe if I just listened more and listened reflectively, that it could move us closer towards understanding. And that was effective. So this is really resonating with me.
Yeah, definitely. What was the biggest difference you perhaps saw in the two different approaches?
I think that it was leading with by example. So by listening, and just kind of allowing for, her, my sister's full expression, and kind of just anchoring what she was saying. It gave me I think that she kind of took the example and did the same when it was time for me to talk. I think sometimes
That's
there's a
great.
fear that if you spend too much time listening, and then you're going to forget like what you have to say, or the interjections, or the corrections, or the context that you want to insert. But, if you allow it, there's room for all of it. But, kind of really just yielding at points in the conversation to listening and absorbing and conveying that you hear is a better way to ensure that you also get heard. So
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things that you just highlighted, like you get heard, right? Again, is your goal to just talk or is your goal to be heard? And
Mhm.
when you're moving in varied, fast paced, high pressure corporate environments, or you're managing teams, we can sometimes lose sight of that, right? Like, I just need you to do. So your goal becomes, um, I need to be heard, as opposed to our people, I'm sorry, I need to talk as opposed to our people hearing you. And that's where a lot of the times you end up having these situations where folks are like, I keep saying the same thing over and over again, right? So appreciate that feedback, Amina. And I also appreciate how you extended it to your personal relationships, because I know I'm talking about professional stuff, but all of this stuff, and even probably more uniquely, is profound in personal relationships, because the emotional challenges and the trust and all the things that you're working on are that much more heightened. So thank you for sharing. I mean, I really appreciate it. And I see there was another comment in here, so I just want to shout that out by, I don't know, ZS. I'm not quite sure what the first name is, but shared, I was able to catch myself talking more and then pulling back to allow myself to listen to see how they were referencing what they heard me say. Absolutely powerful. We're going to dive into a little bit more about this idea of intention and making sure that you are in the moment using some tools to ensure that you are, as it said, pausing and actually asking, is what I'm actually saying landing the way I intend, or is it not? Right. So, so thank you so much. All right. I'm going to shift to this concept of what it takes to actually make sure that your message is landing. Amina, your comment around, am I being heard? So much of your ability to actually have people move and take action and have alignment is about the pre-work, right? This idea of like, what are you doing to actually ensure that your communication is persuasive? Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to have conversations to, in essence, get folks to move something forward, right? And one of the most important things that you have to be intentional around is how much are you building trust? A lot of this stuff actually happens before you even get to the conversation, right? So I just want to spend a few minutes just really bringing this to life, because the way that you build trust before you even get to the ask has to do with how well you're building connection, which is again this idea of how much are you actually listening versus talking. How consistent are you in doing that? Right? Like, are you helping people actually feel safe enough to come to you and in the moment know that they can say something that may not be so easy to hear, and you'll be cool, and that the next time you're not going to pop off on it? I mean, these are some of the challenges. That's how you build credibility. And at the end of the day, this whole approach is around making sure people understand that when you say something, you mean business. Like, that's what credibility is about. So this is why these are the tenets that are the foundation of alignment and action. Without those kind of without the formula of those three things, it's very difficult for you to get alignment and then for people to take action, right? So I want to talk you through a method that I use with my clients called the Oak method. And I mean, this is kind of tying back to a little bit around your conversation around with your sister, because in essence, what are you doing to create connection? It is so easy to destroy trust. You can destroy trust in literally seconds. So this is a tool that always helps you be mindful of in those moments where in those moments where you're not sure if you are creating connection, if you're not sure that you're leading to trust. This is a methodology, a framework that I use with all my clients to help them maintain credibility, as we talk about, right? So this is the Oak method, 3 steps to create connection. The first step is something called owning your emotions. This is about really recognizing what is your emotional state before you even go into the conversation, right? And Amina, you shared like the first time you had to own in that conversation, you was like, I may have been so focused on like proving my point and getting out what I wanted to say and like releasing. The second conversation, perhaps you were more intentional around owning your emotion. What is the kind of energy I want to bring into this conversation, right? So that way you approach it in a much more regulated state, right? Communication is all about emotional regulation. So how much are you leaning into owning what those are? Are you happy? Are you actually exuding a sense of peace? Are you calm, right? What are you doing to do that? Second step is something called assessing your tone, right? This is all about ensuring that your tone aligns with the intent of your message, right? Are you being empathetic if you're trying to create mutual understanding and trust, right? Are you being clear? And this is really important when you maybe have a emotion that is not very like you're angry or you're frustrated. It is possible to convey those emotions without yelling, without screaming. And so that's really what this Oak method is about. What is the tone? You can be angry and still have a calm tone. And how are you making sure that you're aligning with aligning those things? And then the last step is called question to understand, right? And this is really about how are you using genuine curiosity to dig deeper? How often are you asking questions? How often are you asking open-ended questions? Right? Like how often are you actually seeking to understand the other person's motivations, their fears, their concerns, because that is how you build connection. Again, people want to know that you are interested in what their needs are. And the minute they don't believe you, you will lose trust and connection, all right? These steps create the foundation for, like I said, connection, consistency, and credibility. And across the board, those are the three things that you're always trying to make sure that you are keeping at a high level. That is how you maintain a high CQ, this idea of a curiosity quotient, right? So I'm going to bring this to life in a very simple example. And then I want us to dive into actually workshopping this because this is what this is about, right? So I'm going to give you an non-oak approach to a conversation, and then we're going to go into an oak approach to conversation, right? So this is a scenario we're going to start with. We have Alex, who's a manager, and he's addressing a missed deadline with somebody on his team named Jordan. How many of y'all have been managing people and they come to you and they say, I did not hit this deadline, right? It's one of the most common situations that people deal with when they come to me. So this is what a non-oak response would be. Alex says to Jordan, I don't understand why you didn't get this done on time. Like I've explained this so many times, and deadlines matter. This is completely unacceptable. I cannot have this happen again. Somewhat reasonable, right? You missed a deadline. It would make sense that you're frustrated. Now, here is the challenge with this approach. It's an emotionally reactive tone, right? Again, how much have you actually modulated your tone? Do you want Jordan to feel safe? Or do you want him to feel scared to come to you the next time he might make a mistake? And also, there's been no real effort to understand Jordan's perspective, right? Like maybe Jordan had a sick child, like maybe he didn't have clarity on what the deadline was. I mean, there's all kinds of things. So this is what can happen when you don't approach exchanges with the Oak method. And you can understand how this could potentially create some breakdowns in credibility and in trust. Now, this is the Oak approach, just to give you a contrast, right? So in this case, instead of saying what Alex said initially, he says to Jordan, hey, you know what? I just want to talk about this missed deadline. I felt frustrated because this project is a really big priority for our team. And I just would like to know what happened on your end. What I did was the Oak method. I owned my emotions. I felt frustrated. I assessed my tone. He's much more calm. And then he asked a question to understand. Hey, what happened? Jordan's able to respond by saying, you know what, listen, I've been overwhelmed and I just wasn't sure how to prioritize. I've had 5 people coming at me with different things and I just made a bad choice. Alex is able to say, you know what, thanks for sharing. I really appreciate that. Let's make sure we've got a clear process going forward so this doesn't happen again. In this scenario, it might seem a little bit more complicated, but the reality is when you get good at this, this is absolutely essential to you being able to lead smarter because Alex is able to acknowledge his frustration, but he doesn't let it overwhelm his tone, right? His tone is empathetic and is constructive. And he also invites Jordan to participate. What is your perspective? And how can we co-create a solution going forward? Now, I'm just going to pause here and ask, like, do you see how this Oak approach transforms a potentially contentious moment into a much more collaborative one, right? How it can build trust. It addresses the issue head on, but it also allows for a space for positive movement. And again, I'm gonna, stop sharing screen for a hot second because I really would just love to like bring this to life because this is one of those concepts that in a lot of my coaching engagements can really unlock and begin to create some questions. So first off, what are your thoughts just on the kind of contrasting before and after in terms of the oak?
I
Nothing?
think,
Oh,
oh,
go ahead.
what I love about it is that it's good for the goose and the gander, like it, the emotional regulation enables the manager to have a more effective outcome and their employee. And so it's really a bi-directional, kind of bonus track here.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to call out a few folks because y'all have been quiet. Like I said, this is interactive. So, Lashana, I see you on here. Are you able to at least come off mute and maybe share your perspective on this?
Yeah, sorry, my background may be a little bit loud, but hopefully you
Okay.
can hear me okay. Um,
Yes.
I just think it's non-confrontational in a way that's direct and can get the information that you actually need to have the outcome that you want, right? You're there to to resolve an issue, not to make someone feel bad. Like that's what I got from the second example that you gave.
Yeah, definitely. Now, who can be honest enough and raise their hand and say, I would have absolutely said it the first way? I will raise my hand. And if you can't come off camera, drop a thumbs up in the chat, right? Because again, we're all about progress, not perfection. I would absolutely have done it that way. Yes, Lauren, I see you. Matt, I see you. Yeah, I mean, we're human beings, right? Like it's very natural for us to be annoyed. We're pissed. I gave you enough time. Why are you not hitting the deadline? And
Yeah.
yet, I'm
Sorry, one
sorry.
more thing. I
Go
also
ahead.
felt like it focused on the solution rather than like the mistake, right? Because we're all gonna make mistakes. So it's kind of forgiving in like a little bit of a softer way of moving the issue forward to the next step.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to take, first of all, thank you so much. I think that was Lashana, right? Who shared that final point.
It was, yes.
Awesome. All right. So I do want to take a minute. Who, if anybody is open, I'd love to workshop this a little bit and ask, can we put it into practice? Right? Like who here has struggled perhaps with the trust building moment recently? Somebody you're working with, perhaps somebody in your family, and let's workshop it and see how we might have see how we might apply the oak method. This works in action, y'all. I promise. No, quiet today. Well, what are the challenges you all are facing? I mean, you're here for a reason, right? Like what give me something to work with.
Well, I have an example. It doesn't exactly apply, but I work with a team that's brilliant but long-winded. And I feel like sometimes things can go on and on and on. You really have to work to tease out what they're actually trying to communicate. Or, and I also feel like that's a huge contrast to where I can just be like, I want to do ABC this way, and that'll be like, the whole explanation. So
Absolutely.
have you come across that often where,
Absolutely.
yeah, any advice you
Absolutely.
have?
Yes. Yes. How I would describe that is the trust issue is the person is probably having confidence issues. They don't trust that when they're saying it the first time it's landing. So your role as a leader is how do you build their confidence, their trust to understand, hey, I got it the first time. So I'd love to try and oak this with you if you're open, because this is a classic example of how you might oak this conversation. So let me just ask you for top, without any coaching, how might you or how have you typically addressed this? When somebody's long-winded, you want them to be quiet, what do you do?
Well, I haven't really like given them any signs to be quiet, but I'll try to make sure that I'm at least getting out of it what I'm supposed to. So like I'll say it back to them. I'll be like, oh, okay, so what I'm hearing is you want to go horseback riding on a Thursday. Just to make sure that I'm even understanding what they're trying to say because it's feel like it's hidden in between so many words. Um,
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Well, I'm hearing you definitely reflecting. What I don't actually hear you articulating is stopping the wasting of the time. Because what I'm hearing you say is you actually heard them like 5 minutes ago. Is that fair?
yeah,
Okay, good. All right. So let's deal with this issue. And, Lauren, you also asked this question of like, how do I deal with avoidant people? So I think right now what I'm observing is perhaps, wait, is who is that talking? Because I don't think I have, is that Lashana?
yeah, that was me.
Okay,
Shauna.
Lashana avoiding saying what she actually feels, right? So let's shift this into how we might oak a conversation where it's tough, right? You don't want to offend the person, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you're moving efficiently, right? How do you lead smarter, not louder, not longer? So you're not exhausted, you're not wasting time. So here's how I would encourage you to oak that conversation, right? Lashana, let's just assume you're feeling satisfied, right? Like I'm feeling satisfied based on what you said initially. So at this point, tone, encouraging, what additional, outside of everything that you share, what additional information do I need to get from you to be able to move forward? Right? Like that is an oaked. I'm acknowledging, I feel confident. Hey, I'm actually okay. I heard everything you said. It's encouraging. It's very clear. What else do you need from me to feel affirmed that we can move forward? If you were to say that in that moment, Lashana, I wonder how much the person would recognize, oh, hey, maybe I'm actually giving more information as needed, right? An alternative approach might be, hey, I'm feeling confused because I understood what you said 5 minutes ago, but I'm observing you continue to talk. What is it that I am doing that's not making you believe that I understand very confidently what it is you're trying to get me to do? Again, oak method, own my emotion. I'm confused. Tone, very encouraging. Hey, I got it. I got it 5 minutes ago. Question to understand. What am I doing that's making you think that I don't have confidence in you, that I don't understand where to go forward? Do you see how that is a shift, Lashana, that actually allows you to debt the issue, which is this person is going on and on and on, and it's wasting time?
Yeah, I definitely do. Thank you.
Yeah. How does that actually encourage your ability to maybe have that conversation going forward?
I feel like it's a little bit of a nudge to get to the point if there is any more to be told.
Definitely. Yeah.
And it also kind of like reminds them that like, their point was already taken, so they can just, like period, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And the idea is to, again, create trust, right? The trusting thing to say is, I believe you. Like, I hear you. You are presenting in an amazing way. Imagine how affirming that is to somebody, right? Who might be concerned that they're not actually landing well. Kel, I see your hand is raised. You want to come off mute? Or was
There
that
we go.
okay?
Can you hear me okay?
I can. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to kind of share after what you just said, that last example about, what can I do to make you feel more confident? As a person that questions my abilities and my confidence, and it gets shook really easy and destroyed easily. If somebody were to say that to me, I would have really felt seen and heard and valued at that point. So I just wanted to share from my perspective how it would make me feel.
Absolutely. And Kel, this is perfect a perfect segue into the next part of the presentation. So I'm going to dive back in because what Kel just highlighted is something called her currency, right? One of the things that you also need to be mindful of as you're figuring out how to have persuasive communication conversations is what is the person's currency, right? Like, what are the things that matter to this person? And this is what it means to align your ask to their currency. Again, this is another step in terms of that tool around how do you make sure that your conversations and your ask are landing, right? Everybody has a different currency. And what I heard Kel describe is recognition. Belonging is one of her currency metrics, right? And there are two types of currency typically, and they fall into there are two buckets where currencies fall. One is emotional, this idea of recognition. Hey, I see you. I celebrate you. Belonging. Hey, I just want to be a part of the team, right? These are things that emotionally get people going. And so if you can be mindful and intentional about understanding what your team members, your people that you're working with currency are, it can absolutely improve the likelihood that your ask is going to land. The other bucket is something called practical currencies: time, money, growth. I want you to pay me. I want you to promote me. And I want you to actually give me my time back, right? So somebody who might enjoy leaving at 5 o'clock because they have a kid that they want to take to Little League, that is a currency you have to be mindful about. And everybody's currency is different. And unfortunately, we can move through the world thinking that everybody cares about money, everybody cares about growth, promotion. But the reality is sometimes just saying thank you to somebody, right? As Kel said, just acknowledging, celebrating them, affirming them can go a long way to getting them to actually say yes to you. So these are things that I want to make sure that you are mindful of. And as we're continuing to move forward, just think about somebody you're trying to get buy-in from. Like, how much time have you spent asking and considering what their currency is? Right? How might you reframe your ask to align more with their currency to ensure that it's going to land? So continue. Sorry, I said this earlier, but yeah. So just think about this as we're sort of moving through the remaining part of the remaining part of the workshop. The last part of this I want to dive into is really the kind of the how, right? Like we've laid the foundation around the importance of trust, right? We've laid the foundation for the importance of alignment, like making sure you understand their currency. You know, we have this framework around how do you use my oak method to make sure that the connection is there on a more consistent basis to ensure your credibility is there. Now we shift into just like, how do you do this, right? Like at the end of the day, you got to do the ask. So I'm going to walk you through 4 steps that are really essential to ensuring that when you ask, you get the goal and you get the output that you want, right? So there are 4 steps. I'm going to run through them to start, and then we can dive into them in more detail. The first one is, again, understanding their starting point, right? Again, what is the end goal? And I'll tie this back into, what is it that they are concerned about, right? What are the motivations? Like, what are the things that you're trying to get done? So for example, in my earlier story about my attempt to get this cross-functional multi-million-dollar deal together, the things that I hadn't actually thought about were like my marketing team. What did they care about? My IT team, what did they care about? Like really thinking about this in a much more nuanced way. Shout out to your word, Amina, nuanced way to make sure that I was thinking about resistance, like thinking about ways that I could overcome any objections early on. Second thing, again, align their currency. So make sure that your ask is tailored to address their priorities, emotional or practical, right? So if it's like, I bring $1 million, it adds, 50% of that goes to your bottom line, check, right? Listen, I can ensure that you're going to be able to get out of here by 5 o'clock, even though I'm layering in this new potential work stream for you, check. Like making sure you're really thinking about those. Number 3, how do you make it a shared goal, right? How do you make your communication framework be more mutual? And again, this is where the oak framework can really come into play, so you can make sure you're fostering alignment and fostering collaboration. And then number 4, really, what is your call to action? You should never leave a meeting without clarity on A, do you understand what I'm asking? And B, what is your next step to ensure we make that happen? And you'd be amazed how oftentimes people in a rush forget that stuff. And so the importance of really leaning into that cannot be emphasized enough. There is so much technology out there that we can leverage to make this a lot easier. So if you're not leveraging, AI tools, transcript, recording tools, you're making your life much more difficult. And I encourage all of my folks on this call, if you do not have some sort of transcribing that can literally give you summaries of action items, you are making your life much more difficult and you are not leading as strong as you could be. So any questions on that before we dive in? Because again, I'm all about workshopping, and I'd love to, again, take a real challenge and give you guys a little bit of time to think about an ask that you need to make, who you need to get buy-in from, and begin to craft a message that layers in these 4 steps and ideally share. So before we get into any questions on this, Matt, I see you smiling.
I was just thinking about the create a shared goal, right? You know, how
Yeah.
much to lean into. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, how much to lean into creating that shared goal to making sure that the other party understands, right? And how to communicate that in a way that's doesn't seem like pandering or doesn't seem like, you know, a distrustful engagement.
So what do you got? I mean, do you have a situation right now that you're trying to figure out?
Yeah, I always have a have a situation, you know, just trying to get, you know, for example, like trying to get my team to understand that, you know, I really want them to buy into monitoring certain systems that we have in place, uh, and understand its importance in the overall organization, right? Right now, I feel like I'm the only one paying attention to a certain system, right? To a
Okay.
certain notification platform. And I'm really
Yeah.
trying to get buy-in from the team to really understand that, you know, it's something that we all have to take shared responsibility in. So just trying to think of ways to share that goal with them and align with everybody in a way that doesn't feel kind of top down is what.
Absolutely. Well, okay. I mean, then are you open to workshopping it, like using the 4 steps and
Yeah,
seeing
absolutely.
where we go from here? Yeah. So let's start with the first point here, which is understanding their starting point. So, and I want to make sure we're in alignment on who they is. So is this your team? Like,
My team.
help me understand. So
Yeah,
your
my
team
team.
right now, and is where in terms of where you want them to be, right? Because I'm hearing you say you want them to be much more intentional about monitoring a system.
Right.
Am I hearing that
Yeah,
correctly?
that's correct.
Okay, right. Where are they now?
Right now they're not taking ownership. They're not taking I believe that they're not seeing it as such a serious core component of the department or of the team. And you know, it is a core component. It's something very, very important.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is in this first step, we're really trying to understand where they are mentally and where they are emotionally, right? So what I'm hearing you say is emotionally, they don't have a level of urgency that you
Right.
need to have. Is that
Exactly.
fair?
That's
Okay.
very fair.
So they need to have a heightened level of urgency. So this is the starting point, and we're trying to get
Right.
them to really understanding what the next level is. Awesome. All right. Let's do number 2. What is their currency?
That's probably the part that I'm having the divide on what their currency is and how to bridge that gap.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Who on your team? Just think about the currencies that I talked about, right? Actually, let me actually go back so you can see that slide so we can think about it in that way. Right. Are you able to see the slide?
Yep, I see it.
Yeah. So if you were to think about the folks on your team who you're having an issue creating a sense of urgency, what are the things that drive them? Right? Like, is it about promotion? Are they trying to get more money? Like, kind of talk about that a little bit with me.
You know, that's a good question because you know, I look at the emotional recognition and belonging, right? And so I took that approach with several members of the team that, you know, excel in this regard. They're always kind of doing this, right? So, and I shower them with recognition. I remind them how valuable they are to the team. And I try to use those as motivational factors to inspire the other teammates, but it doesn't seem to land as well. So, you know,
But
I'm
what
wondering if
I'm hearing you, what I'm observing is you are extrapolating one currency to your whole team. And what
Mm,
I'm observing is perhaps they may not be true. And so this is where the level of preparation comes into play. And I do this a lot with my clients. I have my clients who are managing teams put together what are called currency maps. Well, they will literally take their entire team, put it on a map, and actually assess what is their currency. So that way you can begin to provide a ask in a much more customized way, right? Like I think unfortunately as leaders, we can think the goal is to try and like, spray as many as we can with kind of those one things. But the challenge with that is human beings are different. And so this is one of the biggest reasons why I talk a lot about currency. So one step you might want to do after this session is to really think about, you got a team of 5 people, what is their currency? Because until you can really understand that, it will be difficult for you to actually align what it is you need them to do to make sure that they go to the other side with what they care about. If it's somebody who's like, yo, I want to get out of here by 5 o'clock, if time is their currency, what is an approach you might do to incentivize them to get this done, to do the thing that you need them to do? Just what are some things? Just
If it's
brainstorm.
time, you know, incentivize them to say, hey, monitor this system and, you know, if you're catching anything, we could potentially work out you could leave early scenario.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, you know what you have to work with more so than I do, but this is the approach. These are the types of ideations and conversations that we need to start have internally, right? To make sure
Right.
that we're not spinning our wheels, right? Because if somebody is not motivated by recognition, you can acknowledge them to your blue in the face and you're not going to get them to act in the way that you need them to act, right? So that's step 2. Step 3, what is a shared goal, right? How do you then move to, let's assume that you are able to give them a day off, right? Hey, if you're able to hit this at this level, monitor the system, consistently for the next 2 weeks, I will give you a half day on Friday. How do you feel about that? How does that goal feel, right? This is where you start moving into a shared goal. And then number 4, create a call to action with clarity, right? So what will be a call to action? And what will be a clarifying way you might approach ending that conversation to ensure that you guys are both aligned?
Proposing just that very solution, right? Hey guys, monitor this system. Here are some incentives that we're going to do for those who do monitor the system, and for sharing that goal with me in line. And as a result, Friday's off for giving me that level of engagement Monday through Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds interesting. It sounds like a great approach to test. And at the end of the day, this is all about testing and proving, right? There's no right or wrong answer. It's just about, are you getting the results that you want? But given this exercise, like, what are some of the insights? Maybe what are some of the things about your approach that you might recognize as areas of shift and opportunity? Maybe just to kind of share out with the rest of the group.
I mean, I just think it means that I need to lean in and be more, or understand my team a little bit more, right? By understanding their currency, it's going to allow me to, kind of learn them more and learn what will work, what will ultimately work for the group, for the team. And I probably just understanding or learning and separating the differences between each one of them.
Yes,
So that's what I'm taking
absolutely.
away from this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Well, thank you so much. I want to make sure I open this up. I mean, what observations, what insights, maybe any surprises that the rest of you all observed as we walk through this? And I see your hand raised, Amina. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, no, this was a great illustration. I'm curious, Kibi, if you have recommendations for how leaders or managers can do that assessment of understanding, the currency of individual members of the team.
Absolutely. So there are 2 ways you can do it. You can have it be something you observe, you just kind of can pay attention over time. But honestly, I tell people to ask. Just ask. I mean, most people will tell you, right? Like, hey, why do you get up every day? Right? If you begin to kind of lean into questions that can approach getting answers to that in a much more expansive way, it will allow you to be able to glean and assess. And like I said, I will have my clients literally, hey, exercise, I want you to put a currency map together, put everybody on a page, and I want you to either have conversations with them, or I would like you to just maybe have conversations with other folks on your team and just kind of say, hey, what do you think are the biggest things that might motivate John or Tina? And you'd be amazed what you will come up with. And then the second step is to just start testing it. Hey, what if I were to give you, a day off? How might that encourage you to actually really make sure that this gets done? Or if I could promise you a raise next year, how much would you increase your efforts in this area? Because this is really, really important to me. Those are ways you can test it. How does that help answer your question?
Thank you.
Thumbs up? Okay, cool. Cal, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, when I used to have them fill out a sheet when they started working for us that had some personal questions like that on there, like how did they like to be recognized, kind of what is their favorite snack, favorite restaurant, things like that. So we had a little bit to go off of. If we wanted to give them just a small incentive, we could go off that list and pick something.
Absolutely. Such an excellent suggestion. Yeah. Cal, you are identifying what I would do if we're shifting to kind of the organizational level. And what Cal is describing, I oftentimes teach a lot of my leaders to do, which is called create what I call silhouette profiles, right? So this is really what you might do with all your onboarding. So anytime somebody comes on board, you've got a set of questions, everybody answers it. To Kel's point, hey, you know, what time do you typically like to leave work? You know, what is your preferred communication style? I mean, everybody can come up with it on their own, but once that's answered, it becomes available to everybody. So no matter who is coming on board, it's a, you know, a lot of folks will maybe print it in a book or others will put it online, but almost like kind of a Facebook-esque thing where you can literally know, and without having to question or guess, hey, you know what? Don't call this person after 5 o'clock, right? It's going to piss them off. Or if you really want this person to make something happen, talk about their kids and send them birthday cards, right? Like, I mean, it's just, I oftentimes am surprised at how hard leaders can make their lives because there is a fear of asking. Now, mind you, tone matters. Again, Oak, making sure you're giving context, making sure that there is a two-way exchange. But the fastest way to get information is typically just to ask. And you'd be amazed how much people will be willing to share with you. Lauren, I do want to make sure that I address your question around avoidant people. And is there a specific situation or dynamic that you're struggling with that I can maybe speak to?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes when you speak to various people, they're a little bit like with the Oak method, you can say I'm frustrated, and I found some of the responses to be avoidant in terms of this sort of kind of duck and weave the question as to why, you know, like if you know, they're ducking and weaving out of responsibility. So I guess I was more interested in how you would deal with something along those lines.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, can you give me a little bit more specifics, like maybe an example where you gave someone feedback and they didn't want to take accountability?
Yeah, like you know, like almost kind of they're reframing it from their perspective and almost like absconding any responsibility. Like, I've asked you to do this. Oh, well, have you like I didn't understand that, or they're just not they're sort of almost pretending that they didn't understand, or like they didn't understand it fully, or I don't know. I guess it's more about maybe it's starting off with the Oak, like instead of like where I've landed. So if you're asking more qualifying questions earlier on and you're very clear about the actions, then you might not get into the same situation.
Yeah. I mean, you're highlighting a couple of key things that as leaders, we have to be intentional around. Is it a trust issue? Right? Because when I hear you say something like people are trying to like pretend that they don't understand or pretend that they didn't get all the information, then I'm dealing with the trust issue. So no matter what you say, it's not going to land because the trust is broken, which is why I started with this idea of like, how are you building trust, right? And if you've broken trust, how are you repairing trust, right? And this is where those early conversations I did around, you know, how are you building credibility? Like, what are you doing? Are you framing conversations early on in exchanges with team members that are more along the non-Oak way, while like, you know, you're being explosive, you know, maybe you're reacting, you know, you're yelling when you are angry and not really being mindful of tone, because that is going to create friction. If people don't trust you, they're not going to do anything that you want. If you don't trust them, you're going to be hesitant to give information. So this is why I talked about a lot of the early conversations in the workshop. So if that's the issue, then we got bigger. It's a different approach, right? Because now you're trying to figure out, can you trust this person? Are they going to be sabotaging? And if so, it may be about shifting them to another group. I mean, there's other solutions you might have to deal with. Now, if you actually do trust the person, then it becomes a constant use of the Oak method to really understand what is it that's causing them to not get you the results that you want, right? And so to your point, it is, okay, I'm feeling confused because you are saying that you understand, and yet when we leave, I'm not getting the results, the output that I would like to get from you. What am I missing? That is how you begin to hold people accountable, right? It's like, I'm confused because we're having these conversations and yet we're getting alignment. And yet when you come back, you're not giving me the results that I want. Now, the key thing when you have this conversation is to stop talking. This is one of the biggest challenges that leaders have, because we ask a question and instead of pausing, dealing with the discomfort, letting them squirm, we start talking. So this is why I started this whole thing with, What is your curiosity quotient? What is your ability? How comfortable are you with being quiet? Right? Because if you're dealing with a person who actually is somebody who's trustworthy and they might say, I don't know, then the response is, okay, I'll wait. Because if you don't know, I don't know, and I don't know where we go from here. So what do you suggest we do?
Yeah, that's a great, I mean, I think that's a great way of dealing with it. And I think my problem is I fill in the answers.
Raise your hand if you
Like
are
I give them the answer.
overtime. That is what all of my clients do. And it's not your fault, you all. I mean, we have been taught leaders are supposed to have the answers. It's our job to come in and tell people what to do. And yes, there are moments where that's necessary, but the reality is those are typically only in crisis situations or when there is like life or death, like urgent things, like where you might have a more, top-down dynamic. But the majority of your time is going to be spent on this type of approach. How are you building trust? How are you making sure you are creating safe spaces? How are you making sure you're modulating your tone, right? How are you making sure that you are consistently leaning into high curiosity quotient behavior? And one thing I would encourage you all to do as we hop off and as we move into putting some of this stuff into action is to really begin to pay attention to in conversations, how much are you listening versus how much are you talking? That's a very good first step to start with. And when you feel the urge to start talking, pause and instead ask an open-ended question. Just ask an open-ended question. It is a good way to begin to build that muscle and to also become aware of how much you actually are not doing the thing that you think you're doing. Because again, this is these concepts, and I have a lot of my clients say, God, Kibi, it sounds so easy, but in execution, it's really, really hard, right? And this is the truth, because a lot of this stuff is about unlearning behaviors and, just habits that we have built over the years that typically get us stuck. They get us caught up. And so this is what my whole work is about. And we've got a few more minutes. I want to make sure I don't miss out on a few of the final slides in here. Sorry, y'all. I'm like going back and forth between two screens. So let me make sure that I give ourselves a chance to talk about this. So first of all, I hope this was helpful. Just beginning to put some of these things in place. Thumbs up. This is really what my coaching style is like. This is what people come to me for, because I'm able to kind of break down a lot of those things that can cause us to get tripped up, and even the most experienced of leaders definitely struggle with this kind of stuff. So I wanted to just, ask, I wanted to first just start by kind of summarizing all the stuff we've really talked about and putting it all together in a way that ideally helps to gel the various concepts we've discussed. So definitely, first off, how are you building trust, right? I mean, as Lauren highlighted, if you don't have trust, it is very difficult to lead. It is impossible to communicate, right? So this OAK method is a very helpful tool to make sure that you are consistently owning your emotions. You're not popping off the handle, assessing your tone, and then consistently remembering to question to understand, right? Number two, how are you aligning your ask with your currency? I want to thank Matt for really acknowledging sometimes we don't think about currency, right? Like we assume everybody's currency is the same. But as a leader, one thing that can really help differentiate you from the rest of your peers is how intentional are you being about really almost like a scalpel, a surgeon, making sure you understand the various currencies of your team members. And then lastly, are you crafting a persuasive message, right? Like, are you thinking about those 4 steps that we talked about, right? Like, are you making sure that you understand where the person's starting point? Again, are you aligning with their currency? Do you have a shared goal? Again, my first issue when I started at the top was I was only thinking about my goals, but I wasn't thinking about the rest of the people I was trying to get on board. And as soon as I shifted that, everything opened up. And by the way, I did close that $1 million deal, y'all. So I just want to celebrate that. That was the win. And again, call to action with clarity, right? These are those 4 steps. And if this is stuff that, is resonating with you, if this is stuff that is maybe sparking a recognition and maybe some of these things are things that I do all the time, and I really want to be more intentional around this. I just want to bring to life how working with me transformed one of my clients who was dealing with a lot of these same things, right? This is Darian. I love Darian. He works for a phenomenal media company that many of y'all pay attention to. But he came to me because he was a frustrated leader, right? He was dealing with a lot of the things that we're talking about. Lauren, people avoid. I mean, he was dealing with folks who weren't really taking accountability. You know, Matt, he was trying to get people to make things happen, but they weren't. And he would have these long meetings and then come back and be frustrated. And he went from that situation to actually rebuilding trust with some folks on his team that he had not realized had been destroyed. And more importantly, just got his time back, right? Like, so I just want to talk about a few of the things that he was struggling with prior to coming in and working with me. So again, struggle with addressing misaligned priorities. Folks were missing deadlines, and this was very, very detrimental because they were rolling out, this is a tech product company too, rolling out a lot of new things. And so his team was getting dinged. He was definitely reacting emotionally under pressure. He was Alex all the way, you know, frustrated, calling people out, creating a lot of tension. And then lastly, he was doing so much reworking, right? You know, he was explaining and reconnecting and having to go back over, you know, plans and all those kind of things. And so he was exhausted, like he was absolutely exhausted. So after working with me, he was able to build trust and clarity and all the things that we're talking about, all the ahas that you're actually observing in, you know, just this time we're having together. So his team felt much more empowered, right? Like felt much more seen. They felt much more celebrated, you know, and those are some of the things that he realized were currency drivers for his team. He was definitely able to manage his emotions more effectively. A lot of that came from learning how to stop talking, you know, just getting comfortable with that discomfort that can come with that ego that kind of kicks in, which is telling you, I should know this, but instead allowing for his team to come in and bring their ideas and actually celebrating all the awesomeness that they brought to the table. And then lastly, because of all this, he was able to get his weekends back. He was able to get his time back. He was a new husband, and I guarantee you his wife sent me thank you cards at the end because not only did this help at work, but it also helped at home. And again, I tell you, this stuff, you get a 2-for-1, y'all. You get a 2-for-1. So if any of this is resonating, I do just want to highlight a program that I teach all of these things in. So everything you're experiencing is brought to life in a group coaching cohort that I do called Communicate Like a Pro. And it's really focused on helping you lead with clarity, right? Like making sure that you are able to inspire with confidence, right? So you don't have people who aren't taking accountability, but they actually are excited to come to the table with ideas and ideally be able to move in a more collaborative way so everybody wins, everybody's excited. So I just want to share with you a little bit about this program in case folks are interested. It's an application-based, peer-based, cohort-based program. So it's all about bringing people together who are at a similar stage in their leadership, who are managing a lot of the same challenges, dealing with very high caliber folks who are overcoming these myths, right? Overcoming these myths. I know how to ask questions. I'm already naturally curious, but when you really begin to get in like exchange with these concepts, you recognize, actually, maybe I'm not doing this the right way. So you are able to overcome these challenges, over explaining, over talking, right? Not digging deeper to really understand, are there trust issues? And if there are, how do I address them? How do I come back, right? The CLAP program, which is the short term for Communicate Like a Pro, CLAP, is really focused on helping you break free from all of those traps and really giving you real practical strategies and tools that will help you achieve the results that you want. Just to highlight what's involved, there are personal evaluations. A lot of this is really focused on helping us recognize some of those learned behaviors, some of those patterns that we need to be more mindful of. And then once that's established, we really move into teaching the lesson. So a lot of these concepts that we've talked about here, we dive into more depth. We give you more time to practice. As you can see, sometimes you might think that you have it together, but when you get into it, you're like, woo, goodness. And so many of my clients will tell me, girl, I did not realize this is going to be as hard, but that's the point, right? We're all about creating live coaching opportunities, supportive cohorts, so you can really, really workshop these things and begin to make them much more intuitive, much more organic. So it doesn't feel clunky. It doesn't feel hard for you to sit and let somebody kind of squirm, but do it in a supportive way. It also comes with 2 one-on-one coaching sessions with me. So that way you can partner and complement the group with perhaps individualized challenges that you're trying to work through. And my enrollment is open now, right? So I just wanted to highlight this. Enrollment's open now for my January cohort. It ends on the 24th of January. So if this is something you're interested, I would encourage you to apply, because spots are limited. And if you are really incentivized, I have a bonus that I'm offering. If you are willing to sign up to participate in the cohort by Friday, the 17th, you actually get an exclusive bonus where you get a one-on-one strategy session with me, which is all about perfecting your LinkedIn, making sure that your external profile to the world is communicating in a persuasive way, right? Like we talk about how we are communicating with individuals one-on-one, but how you show up to the outside world, and specifically your LinkedIn profile today, is really, really your calling card. So we spend a lot of time diving into that, and it'll absolutely accelerate your results. Like I've had folks take advantage of this and have seen transformative results in terms of the number of DMs they're getting, inquiries they're getting, all that kind of stuff. So if that's something that you're in need of, definitely let's talk, and you can take advantage of that. But listen, I'm all about helping you all develop high CQ cultures, high CQ individual scores into 2025, where you are, being bold, building trust, making sure you're knocking your goals out of the park. So, I just love to do what I can to support you all in making 2025 as amazing as you can, right? I want y'all moving smarter and not louder in 2025. So on that note, I will conclude the workshop for today. I thank you all for coming.